So it turns out that Canon's actually going to be expanding. They're right about to acquire 300,000 square meters of what's going to turn into a production facility, a manufacturing facility, with enhanced automation for digital cameras and lenses inside Japan. So it seems like Canon is trying to bring a lot of their manufacturing back to Japan, that they've kind of shipped over to Malaysia and stuff. And so everything that is in kind of one plant they already have now will end up in this, blah, blah, blah. But the important thing about all this is not that, oh, Canon must be doing fine if they're going to buy 300,000 square meters worth of production space. It's that a big part of the purpose of it is to have automated production space so that it's cost effective and so that they're also bringing jobs back to Japan. Because that's a big deal for these big Japanese companies that are, that's a big deal for any economy, is to have manufacturing internal to your borders, right? Like for any country to have manufacturing internal to your borders. And so, but the thing is the automation. The 16 to 35 f2.8 L3 is predominantly made by machines. There are a couple of optical elements that still have to be manufactured by manu, by hand, and so it's not, you can't just go from all by hand to all by machine in one go. You have to kind of take steps, and Canon is taking those steps, and they're wanting more of their stuff to be done by machine because it's more efficient, it's more cost effective, all that. What that means though is that the markup's going to be bigger because it's going to cost less to make, and so the consumer is not going to really see the benefit of that. The company will, and Japan will, but not us users here stateside. So it's really interesting because the way that it's interesting to think about Canon is, they're not in it for the consumer, blah blah. They're not putting new sensors in the 16 Mark II. They're not putting new sensors in the EOS M100, in any APS-C camera that's come out after the ADD, but from a cost perspective, Canon's doing a lot of things that make a lot of sense. And one of those things is increased automation of making their products. Because I don't know if people really realize this, but most of the bits and bobs, right, the camera bodies and the lenses that people buy that are camera oriented are actually made by hand if they're first party, and a lot of times even third party, like Sigma, all their lenses are made by hand. What I mean though is your flash might be assembled by a machine, or if you have a cage for your camera, that might be machined. But these more delicate bits are predominantly made by hand, and so by putting that away from human hands and into a machine makes it cheaper, and so that means that Canon's business model is viable for longer, right? Like one of the big things that's really hurting the interchangeable lens camera market right now is smartphones. One of the big things is smartphones, is the advent of the smartphone in everyone's pocket, and that's what's killing the ILC industry. Grammar is hard sometimes. I'm pretty good at grammar, but grammar is hard sometimes. But the point is, by doing that, it future-proofs them, because they can afford to take less markup, less margin down the line, because they're not having to pay benefits and salaries and dental and retirement, because they are doing a lot more with machines. And so what that means is that Canon will continue to be relevant even once a lot of the camera industry is kind of driven out by smartphones, because smartphones are taking over compacts, have taken over compacts, and fewer people are buying entry-level DSLRs and all that. Now there is some of a resurgence, especially with the mirrorless markets, but getting back to where good is, requires things like increased automation. So yeah, I think it makes a lot of good business sense. I think we're going to keep seeing really high prices for stuff that shouldn't be really highly priced out of Canon. I think they're still going to have issues innovating, and I think in a lot of ways manufacturing being done by a machine instead of by hand, by manu, could actually increase that lack of innovation, because it'll cost more to, you know, change up the manufacturing process, the machine process, than it would to change, you know, how a person fits a sensor into a camera. Because assuming the production line starts with, you know, printing the sensors and all that. So anyway, just a couple of thoughts on that. Thanks for your time and your attention, and I'll see you in the next one.